Okay, so good afternoon everyone, and thank you for coming to this presentation. If everyone can, I guess, put their headphones on. We'll make a start.
Check 2.
Okay, so I think we've all got headphones on now. Everyone's worked out the silent disco style. Thank you very much for attending this session on creating an active data culture for an interconnected world. I'm Philip Dutton. I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs at Solidatus. So before I get into talking about creating this active data culture, first I want to give a bit of background on myself, the company Solidatus, and our data thesis. And really that's to set some context. Context turns facts into actionable information and in the end decisions that have a positive impact. And that's what I hope to achieve today. So be prepared for lots of context featured throughout this presentation. So firstly on myself, formerly trained as a software engineer, focus in computer science, information systems. So from the very start I was interested in not only the technology and the data, but actually the system that it worked within, the surrounding ecosystem that interacted with that data, those systems. I went on to do a postgraduate thesis on trust in electronic commerce. So trust, another big topic in data. How can we trust that data? How can we use that data to actually deliver a positive outcome for us? So another key element. I actually turned down a PhD because I wanted to actually go and take what I'd learned and apply it in an operational setting. So see how the rubber hit the road as it was, to see whether or not what I'd learned was practically applicable and how it would intersect with industry. So then for the next 15 years I did just that. So I focused on the operational. I worked in very, very large organizations. Traditionally, your very large financial services organizations, some of the world's largest investment banks, and really focused on the transformational piece. So understanding how the organizations looked at themselves and needed to transform in order to optimize, to regulate, to govern. And really what I found almost from day one was there was a direct congress between what I thought we should be doing and what we were actually doing. But and I assume many in the crowd, the next 10 years passed where you bang your head against that wall knowing that there is a better way of doing things, and yet there are constraints that mean you can't actually go and do those things. So at the end of that period, both myself and my business partner decided to rather than just complain about circumstance and not move industry forward, we decided to step back to create a solution that would enable us to deal with data, to deal with the ecosystem of data in a different way. And that's where we are today, and that's the background to Solidatus. So Solidatus is one of the fastest growing regtech, fintech, technology companies in the data management space. We were the fastest entrant into the Gartner Magic Quadrant. During COVID, we've grown over 400%. A hugely impressive statistic without COVID. Add COVID over the top, and it really shows the exponential growth that we've received, primarily because we're not alone in believing that there is a better way of doing things. And so what I want to get across today is exactly that thesis of how we think and why we think there needs to be a change in the way that we manage. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you have questions, you have challenges, and hopefully one or two epiphanies. And if we can get to that, for me, that's successful first non-Zoom presentation in about 2 years. So let's see how we go. So our vision is to change the way that the world thinks about, and let's focus on the thinks about, and then manages data, because I think there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that we think. Now, the question you should be asking is, why do I need to change the way I think? And what does that statement actually mean? So fundamentally, the world has changed. We are no longer living in a siloed world. We don't send letters to each other anymore. We hardly use, if there's any faxes. Telephone is being replaced with instant messaging. Email is even on the slow end of our communication. We want to be connected to everybody, and we want to be connected all the time. And increasingly that connection is a desire not just to intersect with people, but it's to intersect with the data that surrounds us, the processes. So the world has dramatically changed. And so therefore, the way we view the world needs to also change. Because you can't compare what we were doing in the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s to what we're doing today and the ecosystem that surrounds data for us. If you look at the themes for Big Data London, tame your data demon. The focus on data being this demon that in some way introduces risk and fear. Actually, it's something that we should be looking at as an enabler, something that makes us be able to feel safer, be able to deal with new situations because we have more information, not less information. Setting your data free. Let's start using what we have. And I think if we look around the panels from the session, there is a constant reinforcement of this. What we're doing today isn't working. If we focus on 2007, 2008, we saw a small glimpse of what happens when the wheels fall off. The world goes into chaos. Now, for me, we haven't fixed the fundamental problem that led to that scenario. And we need to if we're to move forward in a fashion. So we need to create a different data culture. It's not about data sitting on the side. It's about embracing that culture and bringing it into everything that we do. So let's look at some data, because data is context. This is going to give us some information. So 2.5 quintillion bytes of data is created every day. Now, if we think about that number, and it's super difficult to quantify, but the US Library of Congress has about 170 million items in it. A lot of organizations create a factor more than that information every day. So what's been accumulated over centuries is now being generated by a single organization in a single day. And if we look at the statistic of 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years, what is the R on that curve? It's not a flat line. It's a steep trajectory, and it's only going to accelerate because of data, because of fintech, because of events like Big Data London, where people want to embrace data. It's not a slowing growth pattern. It's only ever increasing. Some scary statistics then of the amount of revenue that's being spent on compliance. So we have data, this one trajectory which is more than exponential. We then have this huge amount of money that has to be spent on complying with the regulations, because the regulators don't trust that we can handle our data correctly, that we understand our data. And so therefore there has been a tsunami of regulation. In finance, that's been almost halting to whole organizations because of this huge volume. But it's not just financial services. Regulation is now across everyone. If we introduce the idea of GDPR, data privacy, and the 128 different current regulations, we see that it's more and more becoming about data and how we manage it and how we use it. And people are becoming much more aware of my data. It's important. I don't want it used for the wrong purpose. And I care about its usage. So all of these factors create this perfect storm of complexity. So 3 takeaways that you should have from this piece is there will never be less data. There will never be less data. There will never be less regulation, and we will never want to change slower than we change today. We're on an exponential path with all of these 3 items, and what that creates is the challenge of managing data. It's not the same challenge that we had in the 80s when we had 5 systems and a little bit of data. It's now tens of thousands of systems, hundreds of thousands of intersections. So, Solidaris, the product Solidaris, and the ethos that we have is really to derive actionable intelligence from complex data. We're not talking about simple data sets. We're talking about the intersection of lots and lots and lots of different data sets. A customer isn't one-dimensional. It has many dimensions. Those dimensions need to be considered over time. And so in order to achieve that, we need to make sure that we're focusing on transparency, creating that trust that I talked about at the very start. So let's look at a real-world example of data and the evolution of how we use data. So on the very far left, a treasure map. You'll see that it is, first of all, visual. It's not a list of things of how to get to the treasure. It's not a catalogue of take this step and that step and that step. It's visual because we understand the visual paradigm much more than we do the written paradigm. But it gives you an arbitrary, fairly abstract view on how do we get there. There's no context to how do I get from where I am to the end of my journey. We step forward to, and really, unfortunately, for a lot of organizations, that's their data management capabilities. That's the focus that they've placed on this critical piece. The next step is the classic A to Z. Very static, lots of information about the roads, but one-dimensional. It only focuses on the one dimension of here is the map of the roads. It doesn't tell me anything about the environment that it sits in, the context. Move forward to a GPS system. And we start to see a few intersecting data sets now. So we see there's me, there's the map, and there's some buildings for context. So I'm aware of my surroundings as I go. So you can see this evolutionary process has gone, and we will have all spent time in, hopefully not the one on the left, but certainly the middle and the far right. But actually, we need that quantum leap. We need to go from the A to Z to Google Maps. And what Google Maps did, and the same thing that Solidaris is trying to do, is to bring that visual nature first and understand that the intersection of data is the most valuable thing. It needs to be intuitive. It needs to be something that I don't need to go and spend weeks and months learning, because we all don't have time to do that, to commit to one technology. It's about having that real-time availability of data. So I can intersect ETL with data quality, intersecting it with policy. I can consider people, data, process, regulation, all as data. And by creating that uniform view, I can actually allow myself to gain much more valuable insights much more quickly. And so for me, we're at that tipping point. We need a revolution. We can't just keep making small incrementals, because small incrementals are here and all our complexity is here. We're never going to intersect, and we're never going to get on top of this. It needs to be that revolution. So how do you launch a data revolution? So software isn't enough, and that's why this talk is about creating a data culture. It's about understanding that capability is not an isolated island. Capabilities need to be deployed. They need to intersect with operational elements. They need to intersect with those people. They need to intersect with the processes you have, the legacy that you have, the future state that you want. All of these things need to be considered. And so the organization fundamentally needs to change its thinking. It's not that we say, well, I used to do it this way yesterday, I'll continue to do that as we continue forward. So capability is easy to compare on a web page. What's different to Solidaris to an Informatica or a Calibra or any of the other tools that sit in the metadata management space? And it's not a new space. We've been doing this for a long time. I postulate that we've been doing it, but we're no longer doing it correctly. We're doing it the way that we thought we should do it, and for me it didn't work. So if I think about Solidaris and how I conceptualize the world, as I mentioned, people, process, regulation, policy, all of those things need to be considered holistically. We want to bring this to the visual medium because we want it to be fast. We want to make sure that you're not spending your day in Solidaris looking for some information. It should be instantly available. It really is about that instant gratification that we're looking for. We need to think not about the what we're doing, but the why we're doing it. The business outcome is the main importance here. Whether it's done through a Solidaris or a different product makes no difference to me. As long as we're moving towards that state of improvement across data, then we're going in the right direction. Because if we stand still, we're never going to get where we need to be. I mentioned the intuitive, and if anyone's old enough, there's a few people I think in the room old enough to remember when Windows 95 came out and you got shipped a 150-page manual to understand the operating system. Fairly simple operating system in today's standards. Today, if you get an iPhone which has a much more complicated operating system, you don't even get an instruction manual. It's intuitive. And building intuitive software is really hard, but it's worth the effort, because actually that means that people get to interact really quickly with the thing they want, and they get their desired outcome. They get that action quickly. They don't need to go and spend days, weeks learning how to use their phone. So the key takeaway, let's stop thinking about the world in silos. The world is no longer siloed. The world is infinitely connected. We need to also start to elevate that thinking away from, let's not just think about the pipes through which the data run. Technical lineage, a lot of the metadata management that people focus on is about the technical. Business doesn't care about how you do it. Business cares of whether they get their output, their action. And so we need to think about that as well. We need to elevate that. We need that thought of intersecting data, not just having ETL in my ETL tool, data quality profiling my data quality profiling tool, governance in my governance tool, policy in my policy tool. Those things in isolation leave us with islands. By connecting them, we actually get to that outcome much more quickly. So it needs to be dynamic, it needs to be holistic. We need to think broad, we need to think deep. We need to make sure that we're introducing those Google Map elements, the real time. The context is, as I move, my world moves with me. Data isn't isolated, it always has context, and context gives it meaning. I'm just checking for time. I think we're okay. So, transformation. How do we actually go about doing this? And when I look at a lot of what's being sort of talked about, I see that we're missing fundamental learnings from engineering. A lot of these data management problems have been solved in other engineering disciplines. Maybe not in software engineering, but in other engineerings they have. So simple question, would you walk into a building which had no plan when it was being built, where you didn't understand, or someone who was building it didn't understand the components and any of their structural elements, the nature of them, how much weight they could hold as a supporting beam, and whether or not those elements, when intersected, would have an impact? So if I have my plumbing and I have my electricals running through my plumbing, no map, no understanding of what we're putting together, would you enter that building? And I think, well, I hope the answer is absolutely not. But every day, organizations take that approach to their data. They don't understand it. They don't understand the context. They don't understand how it intersects. And yet they use it for making very, very significant decisions to drive their organization forward. So they're not embracing what we've already learned from mechanical, structural engineering. We need to have a blueprint. Big data, talking about blueprints. We need to have that blueprint. And there's not a single blueprint, there's multiple. And they all need to be considered because data needs to be considered through multiple lenses. There is the technical lens, there's the business lens, there's the cost lens, there's the quality lens, there's the control lens, there's the governance lens. All of these are different lenses, but we have to have all of those be able to be combined to actually understand that context of what we're talking about. And so for me, we need to look more at other engineering disciplines to really see how we should be thinking about the world and how we can gain insights to move more quickly. So, often when people approach this as a problem, they think, big bang, I need to do this all at once and I need to get it done. The problem is that never works because your organization never stops for long enough for you to do all the work you need to do and then to be able to start again. So you've got to think about the approach. And for me, these 4 pillars really feed in a very cyclical cycle into each other. The projects which get the money, the regulation and the transformation, because they're the core celebs, right? I've got a new regulation, I have to do this, I've got no choice, I've got to spend the money. I need to optimize, my estate. So I need to transform my organization. I need to move away from mainframe to be a cloud native organization. Lots of money spent. The problem is we don't use that to then reinforce and to accelerate what we're doing in a BAU. So we spend all of this money, but none of the benefits come through into the BAU. That process doesn't change. That process might have new technology to support it, but it hasn't fundamentally changed. And so what we need to do is to have each of these feeding in, because better BAU practice means easier transformation, means less burden when a new regulation comes down the pipe. Proactivity really needs to come into this. We've been far too reactive. Most people, when they think about Lineage, think about a change in production and then I get notified of that change in my data governance or my metadata management platform. At that point, it's too late. The change has been made. If that breaks your trading system is broken until you can fix it. And this happens repeatedly. I mean, I've got lots of stories of non-trading days where, a few decimal points has meant someone as advanced as Goldman Sachs has to stop trading for a few decimal points in a single system, destroying downstream systems. These are the types of things. So I'm going to quickly focus on, because I know I'm running out of time and I'm talking much more than I expected to. So data privacy, huge challenge, and we're in the privacy or governance and privacy theater. So hopefully this is a theme that everyone is aware of. Huge problem, huge fines. Everyone I'm sure is aware of British Airways and their data breach. Lots and lots of information about that in the market. Amazon recently, WhatsApp. It seems like there's a never-ending list of companies who are now being fined increasingly more significant amounts. And if you look at that list, WhatsApp's a really new application. Amazon is a really new organization. They don't have the excuse of we've got all of this legacy that we need to get to and so we don't understand it. It's just they're not thinking about what GDPR postulates as being the basis. By default and by design. Are we thinking about this first? Is everything that we do thinking towards this end? And we really need to do that because GDPR is one of I think currently about 128 different privacy laws. So if you're a global multinational, if you want to consider sharing data across different jurisdictions, you've got 128 different countries potentially to deal with. You might have 100 different entities in your organization. Each of those entities might be made up of 10, 20, 50 different lines of business doing functionally, operationally very different things. So the complexity matrix that you then create means that the organization can't actually share data when they want to. So just like COVID, data privacy is a pandemic. It's spreading across the world, and it's creating huge restrictions for organizations wanting to utilize data. One of our clients, as an example, had a team globally of 400 people just to manage their data sharing agreements. 400 people globally managing, can I access this data? Can I move this data from where it is into the cloud? And it was taking them between 4 and 18 months to get authority to move that data. So this organization, which everybody knows, had this huge constraint that had been introduced only fairly recently, because prior to GDPR and all of the privacy regulations, they didn't have to do this to the same level. So they went from being quite agile to completely pedestrian. That really put a noose around their neck. They want to be innovative. They want to continue. Make sure I'm zipping through this now. So, using our groundbreaking and I think really kind of conceptually very different lineage first approach. So understanding the connections before the catalog. The catalog should be informed from the connections. What we were able to do with them in a very, very short period of time was to reduce the management of that area down to 3 people globally. 400 to 3. And it went from between 4 and 18 months to 3 minutes. So that organization to date estimates savings of about $70 million US. That's one small use case, one very large organization. That's one small pocket. That was data sharing. We didn't look at records retention. We are looking at records retention because that falls off the back of the data sharing. We didn't look at entitlements. That also is another thing that falls off. Reuse is a theme which I don't think is kind of talked about enough. Do once, reuse, not do once, do the same thing again. And that's what people do. GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million. 3 different teams, no overlap, no kind of continuation of stuff. It's in Excel, it's in Visio, it's somewhere else. We don't have it. So we're going to run through a really quick demonstration of trying to conceptualize or to visualize what I've been talking about kind of conceptually. So in this, we're going to take a really simple example of, here is GDPR, here is the UK data protection. Previously, they were equivalent, now there's going to be regulatory diversion. Actually, currently, how easy would it be for you to be able to tell me the difference between the two? What you can do, what you can't do. So let's run demo quickly, and we'll see. So basically what we're setting up here is this is blank Solidatus. We're coming in. What we're going to do, as long as this is running, I hope. This is a problem. Sorry, we're going to have to see why this isn't working. Sorry.
Like the presentation?
No, it's still in, it's just not playing the video. Oh, hang on, now it's playing. Oh, sorry. Okay, so now we've loaded 2 regulations. We've taken some fairly unstructured data and we've structured it really nicely. Then we've created a common policy domain. This is so we can look for equivalence. We've got a stake in the ground through which to map. We then can see that this is the entirety of the regulation. This is every character that exists. And we can do this for all 128 regulations. The common domain gives us that common language, a common taxonomy through which to describe. We create these linkages. So we're using Lineage now to actually understand the difference between regulations. And now I can start to see immediately on the screen using some nice visualizations where I can share data under GDPR and where I can share data under UK data protection. And we can see this through time. And this is immediately available. I can search this, I can query this, I can write business rules against this. This is all available out of the box. No customization needed. So here we go. The only difference is the UK under GDPR currently is the sharing of data to Estonia. The other way around, the UK is now looking to be able to extend this into all of these other countries. So we're seeing how the regulation changes and what the difference is. Whether this is regulation, if I wanted to look at now is who is implementing this, I can look at that as well. If I want to look at how that connects to my systems that hold the data and how I retain it, I can add that in as well. Everything is linkable in this tool. As I mentioned, we don't differentiate between what is data and what is not data, or not considered data. So, the stick. Why do we have to do this? Why is this even an issue? Well, here's some of the reasons why you really should be focusing on this as an issue. Probably, approaching the hundreds of billions in fines for data privacy, data misuse. We need to look at those. But the stick isn't the reason that you should be doing this. The carrot is. The revolution. Amazon and how they've changed warehousing and distribution. That's the value. That's the business driver right there. That's what you want to focus on. So the question, are you ready to change? Thank you. Any questions? Happy to take them. Thank you very much. Oh, we have a question. I'm already over time, so they might not let me. And actually, I need to grab a set of
Could
headphones.
everybody bring out their rubbish, please, just for the COVID? Thank you. Put it into the bin out the back here, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much.